He called every night, always, at the same time. 7:04 p.m., not 7 o'clock, not 7:05, always 7:04. It was a running joke between us. He said it gave the clocks time to think. I remember one evening, when I asked him why not just call at 7. He laughed, and said, because 7 is boring. But 7:04, that's a man with purpose. I never argued with that logic, not when it came from my father. For nearly 20 years, the phone would ring once, twice, and then I'd hear his voice on the line. Steady.com, comforting in a way only something deeply familiar can be. Some nights, we talked for 5 minutes, others, a full hour. Sometimes we didn't talk at all, just sat in silence, knowing the other was there. Then, in November, he died. I got the call from the hospital at 6:42 p.m. I didn't answer the phone the first time. I let it ring. Somehow, I already knew what it was going to say. The second time it rang, I picked up, but the line was quiet for a moment. Before the nurse spoke, my father had passed. Quietly, in his sleep, he was alone in the room, but they said his hand was resting near the phone on the table, like he'd been reaching for it. The first night after he died, I sat in my kitchen at 7:03 and stared at the phone that didn't ring. Of course, it didn't. There's no magic in grief, no echoes that come back on cue. Just quiet. Just the empty seat across from you where someone used to be. But the next night, it rang. 7:04, exactly. I froze. Didn't move. It rang again. And again. 3 rings, just like always. My heart was loud in my chest. But I answered, hello. Silence. Then, a crackle. Like a cassette being played too close to the microphone. Then his voice. Hey kid. I nearly dropped the phone. Not a recording, not static. It was him. As clear as any other. Night, how's your Tuesday been? He asked, just like he always had. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. He filled the silence for me, talking about the weather. How the Yankees weren't worth watching anymore. How I needed to get that door hinge fixed in the hallway before it made the whole house lean. I just sat there, listening. And when the call ended, he said the same thing he always did. Talk tomorrow. 7:04, be good. Then the line clicked. And there I was, staring at the receiver like it had become something sacred. The next day, I convinced myself it was stress, grief, imagination. I hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. The mind plays tricks, especially when it wants something to be true. But that night, at 7:04, the phone rang again. And again, it was him. Hey kid, you sound tired. I asked, is this a recording? He laughed. Do I sound that bad? It wasn't a recording. I knew it. He responded to what I said. He paused, made jokes, even sighed at one point when I told him the dog chewed through another power cord. It was a conversation, not a message, and so it went. Night after night, always at 7:04. Always just once a day. Always just him. I didn't tell anyone at first. Because how do you explain something like that? My dead father is calling me every night. It doesn't sound sane. It sounds like a man unraveling. So I kept it quiet. Wrote it off as closure. A final kindness from the universe. But deep down, I knew it was real. He remembered things. Specific things, like where I'd left my car keys the night before. What I had cooked. What I hadn't said out loud. One night, he asked how the repair was going on the screen door in the back. I hadn't told anyone I'd started fixing it. Another night, he asked if I ever got around to reading that book I kept meaning to start. He even mentioned the box in the attic, one I hadn't touched in years. Don't throw it out, he said. I know you don't want to open it, but it's not ready to be forgotten. I sat there in the dark that night, staring at the ceiling, holding the phone long after he'd hung up, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel alone. By the end of the first week, I had stopped trying to explain it. He called, I answered. That was the truth. I didn't ask how. I didn't ask why, because part of me was afraid that if I questioned it too hard, it might stop, and the calls had become the only part of the day that didn't feel hollow. We talked about everything. Groceries, the weather, the neighbors, and how they still parked like idiots. But sometimes, he got quiet. And when he did, I knew there was something he wanted to say, but wasn't ready to yet. Or maybe I wasn't ready to hear it. One night, I asked him, "Is this really you?" There was a pause, longer than usual. Then he said, "I don't know how this is happening. Only that it is. And I think we're both here because we still have something left to say." That sentence stuck with me, not just what he said, but how he said it. Like he was aware of the line between us, but didn't mind that it was blurry now. Later that night, I walked into the kitchen, still thinking about that call, and saw the calendar on the wall. It was still flipped to November, the month he died. I hadn't even noticed. I reached up to tear the page away, but stopped. Instead, I left it there. A small, silent reminder that something hadn't moved on just yet. The next evening, I was waiting by the phone before 7 o'clock, like a child counting down to Christmas. And when it rang, my chest hurt from how fast I picked it up. There was something about the calls that started changing me. Not in a dramatic way, not suddenly, but slowly, like something melting after years of ice. I found myself waking up earlier, eating better, even opening the blinds in the kitchen, which I hadn't touched since the funeral. His voice had that effect. It made the air feel full again. We started talking longer. Some nights, I'd sit there with the phone pressed to my ear, eyes closed, just listening to the rhythm of his speech. He always spoke like he had time, slow, thoughtful, with little jokes hidden in between. "Did you fix that drawer yet?" he asked one evening, the one that always sticks like it's guarding treasure. I laughed and said no. He said, "That drawer's going to outlive both of us." You know that it was such a stupid, perfect line that I wrote it down after we hung up. I started keeping a notebook, actually, not a journal, not really, just things he said, things I didn't want to lose again. One night, after a longer pause, he asked me something different. "Do you remember the beach house?" I did. We'd gone there every summer when I was a kid. Sand in our shoes, mismatched towels, old fans rattling at night while waves whispered through the open windows. "Of course," I said. There was a silence on the line, but not empty. More like something gathering. "That's where I first realized you were going to be all right." He said, "You were 7. You helped a stranger find her lost dog. Didn't even ask why. You just moved." I didn't remember that part, but he did, and that meant more than I could say. I asked if he remembered the green plastic shovel I used to carry around like it was a sword. He laughed. "That thing, you wouldn't let go of it for 2 summers. You even tried to bring it to bed." I smiled into the receiver, eyes wet and burning. "I think I buried it in the backyard," I said. "You did," he replied, "and you cried like you were sending off a soldier." These were not just phone calls. They were visits, returns, pieces of something I thought I'd lost, given back. One memory at a time. And every night, he ended the same way. "Be good. Talk tomorrow." 7:04. Then came the night I almost missed the call. I'd fallen asleep on the couch, TV buzzing low, a half-finished cup of tea cooling on the table. I woke up at 7:06, heart racing. I grabbed the phone, nothing. No missed call, no voicemail, just silence. I waited. 10 minutes, 15 dot, still nothing. I sat with the receiver in my hand, not knowing whether to be angry or afraid. But then, at 7:19, the phone rang dot once. Twice dot, I answered so fast, I nearly pulled the cord out of the wall. "Hey kid," he said. His voice sounded different, fainter, like he was farther away. "You missed your spot tonight." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry." "No need for sorry, just be there tomorrow." Then silence, click. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking, what happens if I miss again? Is this fragile thing, this impossible gift, something I could lose? I started setting an alarm at 6:30, started lighting a small candle by the phone, started listening to the air. Like maybe he could come through even before he rang. And every night, when the phone rang on time, my heart would steady again. But slowly, I started to realize something. The conversations were changing. He was saying less, asking fewer questions, more pauses, more of that strange, distant silence between words. And then, one night, he said something that stayed with me. Sometimes, he said, we're not calling to talk, we're calling to listen. I didn't understand at first, thought maybe he meant me, but then he added, I want to hear you now. So I told him about my day, about the walk I took through the neighborhood, about the old mailbox I passed that looked exactly like the one we had when I was 10. I told him I fixed the drawer finally. And he laughed then, softly. I'm glad you did. That was it, no deeper message, no mystery solved. Just that quiet, familiar rhythm that meant he was still with me. A week passed, then another. The calls continued, always at 7:04, always his voice, always that same pause before he spoke, as if the line needed to warm up. I stopped asking how it worked. I stopped questioning reality, because by now, this was my reality. The world had shifted. What mattered to me was no longer what made sense, but what brought comfort. What brought him. My days started revolving around those calls. I stopped making plans in the evening, stopped taking long drives that might run late. Everything from groceries to laundry fit around that sacred minute. Sometimes I felt silly, other times blessed. And then there were moments I felt something else entirely. Fear, it crept in slowly. Not fear of him, never that, but fear of silence, of the call not coming, of hearing static instead of his voice. Because, as much as the calls had become part of my life, I knew deep down that nothing lasts forever. Even things that shouldn't be possible. Especially those he noticed. Of course, you sound different tonight, he said once. Just tired, I lied. He was quiet for a while. Then, yeah, me too. That scared me more than I expected. He'd never said that before. Never sounded worn. Another night, I asked him what he did. Between calls, there was a long pause. Then, I wait. That was it. No explanation. Just 2 words, delivered with a kind of peace I couldn't quite understand. I wait. It made sense in a way. It was how I felt, too. One evening, he didn't ask about my day, didn't mention the neighbors, or the weather, or my squeaky porch light. Instead, he asked, do you remember the night I taught you how to drive? I smiled. How could I forget? We'd gone to the empty grocery store lot after hours. He sat in the passenger seat, feet flat, hands on his knees. You treat the car like a stubborn horse, he'd said. You don't fight it, you guide it. I told him he sounded like a cowboy. He said, well, that's where all the good metaphors live. That memory opened something in me. So I told him things I hadn't said in years. How I used to sneak into his closet as a kid just to try on his coat. The heavy brown one that smelled like leather and dust and something like safety. How I found one of his old notebooks last winter and couldn't bring myself to read past the first page. How I still kept the spare key under the same stone in the garden, even though I changed all the locks years ago. He listened, didn't interrupt, didn't try to explain anything, just listened. Then he said something that froze me. That's good, because soon you'll need to remember more than just my voice. I didn't know what he meant. I didn't want to know. So I deflected, changed the subject. Told him about the strange noise my fridge started making. He played along. Made a joke about haunted appliances, but I could feel it. Something was shifting. That night, after the call, I stood in the hallway for a long time, just standing, breathing, listening to the house. It creaked the way it always had, settled in the bones like an old man. But something about it felt different. Like the house itself knew that these calls were borrowed time. The next evening, I sat by the phone with the candle burning beside me, like always. 7:04 came, the ring came, I answered, "Hey kid," but this time, his voice was fainter. Not in volume, in presence. Like it was coming from farther away. Like a signal just barely holding together. "How was your day?" I asked. "You tell me," he said. So I did. Told him about the weather, about the squirrel on the windowsill, about the article I read about old radio towers being taken down, and when I stopped talking, he didn't speak for a while. Then, "That's nice. I like when you talk." There was something final in his tone. Not goodbye, but something close. "I'm glad we had this," he said softly. "More than you know." I swallowed hard. "I'm not ready," I said. He didn't say anything back. Not for a moment. Then, "You'll be all right. You already are." I started sleeping with the phone on my chest. Not because I was afraid to miss his call, but because I didn't want to let go of that closeness. It felt like a connection to something older than grief, older than words. Like his voice was a thread running from the other side of the world through the receiver and into my chest. The next few nights, he barely spoke. He'd answer with a "Hey kid," then go quiet, listening as I talked. And I did talk, more than I had in years. I told him about old friends, memories I hadn't visited in decades. How I once broke my arm riding a shopping cart down the hill. How I fell in love with a girl I never had the courage to write back to. I told him about the day he left. What I felt, what I couldn't say. In that hospital room, he didn't interrupt. Only breathed softly, like he'd been waiting for all of it. Then came the night he didn't say anything at all. I answered, "Hey Dad," nothing. Just the sound of a line open. Not empty, but ... waiting. Started to panic. Thought maybe I'd lost him. Maybe whatever this was had passed. But just as I was about to hang up, I heard it. A hum, low, almost like static, but not broken. Alive, present, I spoke again. "I'm still here." And then, softly, "I know." That was the whole call. Words between us. But somehow, it meant more than any hour-long conversation we'd ever had. The next morning, I opened the box in the attic, the one he told me not to throw out. It was filled with cassette tapes. Not music. Not labeled ... just numbers, dates, each one. A day from my childhood, my graduation, my first car. The day Mom passed. He'd recorded over the years, moments, snippets, his voice, her voice, even mine, as a child, shouting from the background. He had saved them. All this time, all those years, and never told me. I sat for hours listening to his laughter. Her voice calling my name, even the sound of a storm we once watched from the porch. When the power went out and we lit candles in the hallway, I cried. Of course, I cried, but it wasn't out of pain, it was gratitude. For the fact that someone loved me enough to want me to remember. That night, at 7:04, I didn't sit by the phone. I stood by the window instead, watching the sky fade, listening to the quiet hum of the house settling into dusk. And when the phone rang, I walked slowly to answer it. "Hey, kid," he said, softer now, like wind through an open screen. "You found them," he added. "I did," I said. "I wasn't ready before, but I'm glad I have them now." He paused, then so am I. I asked him how long the calls would keep coming. His voice trembled just slightly. "As long as they need to." And after that, I asked. He didn't answer at first, then quietly, "Then you'll know how to keep going without them." That silence between us, it was fuller than any sound. I told him I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of forgetting, not of losing him again. "Good," he said, "because I didn't leave you empty." "No," I replied, "you didn't." That night, I didn't hang up right away. I sat with the phone to my ear long after the line went quiet, just listening. And I realized he hadn't just been calling me, he'd been preparing me, helping me step into a version of life that didn't include him but still carried him in every room I walked through. The day felt slower than usual. The morning stretched, the afternoon drifted. And by evening, I had done nothing but walk from room to room, touching things he once touched. His toolbox, the back of the chair that still creaked when you leaned too far, the drawer with that old jammed tape measure he never threw away. Each object felt like a sentence he never got to finish. But now, I was the one carrying the punctuation. I sat by the phone at 6:58. The candle flickered, like always. The room had that early evening stillness, the kind that feels like a held breath. At 7:04, it rang. I picked it up, slowly now, not with urgency, but with quiet reverence. "Hey, kid," his voice said, but it wasn't just softer, it was distant, like it came from a hallway in a dream. We didn't say much, we didn't need to. He listened, I spoke. Then we sat there, just breathing into the space between our voices. And then he said, "Do you remember your 10th birthday?" I smiled. "You mean the one where the cake caught fire?" "Yeah," he laughed. "That one." We both chuckled. I could almost hear the old kitchen around us again, the sound of the back door sticking, Mum shouting for someone to grab water, the dog barking like we'd summoned a demon. It was a good memory, a bright one. After that, we didn't talk much. There was a long silence, not awkward, but final, not heavy, but full. Then he said something I'll never forget. "You did good, kid, better than I ever taught you." I closed my eyes. "That because you showed me, even when you thought I wasn't paying attention." He chuckled. "Ain't that the truth?" Then he said my name, just once, softly. Not like a goodbye, but like a hand on the shoulder before walking out of a room. "I'm proud of you." It wasn't the kind of line people say in movies. It wasn't dramatic, it was simple, real, earned, and it broke me in the gentlest way possible. I tried to say something back, but the words got lost. He waited, then said, "It's okay, you don't have to." We both knew what was coming, even if neither of us said it out loud. But there was no grief, only stillness. He asked me to do one thing. Just light the candle one more night, even if I don't call. I promised I would. And then he paused. And in that space, I could feel something shifting, like the distance between us had stretched just a little too far. Then, "Be good, kid, always." Click, the line went quiet. I didn't cry, not that night. Instead, I sat there just holding the receiver, letting the silence bloom. And it didn't hurt. It just was like opening a window and letting something warm slip out into the dark. The next night, I lit the candle just like he asked. 6:50, then 7 o'clock, then 7:04. No. Call the phone. Sat still, silent. The room felt different. Not empty, not cold. Just changed. Like something had been carried away gently while I wasn't looking. I waited another minute. Then 2, then I smiled. Because I knew this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't an ending. Not really. It was just time. I left the candle burning until it finished itself. No rush, no tears. Then I went to the living room and opened the drawer where I'd been keeping the old cassette tapes he'd recorded over the years. One by one, I rewound them. One by one, I placed them back into the box. And when I closed the lid, I didn't feel like I was shutting him away. I felt like I was sealing something safe, something complete. Life didn't suddenly become bright again. I still missed him. Still do, but the weight shifted. It no longer pulled me down. It simply stayed with me. Like his voice had moved from the phone into the walls, into the spaces, between footsteps, into the rhythm of routines I didn't know he'd shaped. I still talk to him sometimes, out loud, quietly, usually when I pass the chair he always sat in, or when I hear the creak on the stairs that only ever answered to his boots. And sometimes, when I walk past the phone at 7:04, I stop, just for a second, just to listen. Nothing ever rings. But the pause, that little moment where something could is enough. It took me time to realize something simple. He wasn't calling to stay. He was calling to let go, gently, not of me, but of the space between us, so I could fill it with memory instead of absence. Some people leave nothing behind, but dust. He left his voice, he left routine, he left kindness, in places I didn't know he'd touched. And I think that's the most we can ever ask for, to be remembered without being mourned every day, to be carried not as a wound, but as something soft and steady. The phone still sits in the same place, the calendar is finally on the right month, and the candle, I lit it again tonight. Not because I expected him, just because it makes the house feel full.